Good evening, everybody. It is 6:32 on June 8th, and I'll call the Urban Design Commission to order. Can I have a roll call?
Mr. Sawhill?
Here.
Ms. Sullivan? Here. Mr. Winchester?
Here.
Ms. Ream? Here. Mr. Leonetti?
Here.
Mr. Miller?
Here.
Ms. Morse?
Here.
Mr. Condon has been excused. Thank you.
Thank you, and it sounds like we have a quorum. And do we have any agenda changes? I don't believe we do, so we will move on to the minutes. We have minutes from Wednesday, May 11th and Wednesday, May 25th. Can I get a motion to approve? And a second? I get a second to approve the... Thank you. I have a motion from Mr. Sawhill and a second from Ms. Ream. Do we have any changes to the... Seeing everybody shaking their head no, those are approved. Next is special order of business. Disclosures, we'll just go down the line like we did last time. Mr. Winchester, disclosures?
None, sir.
Okay. Mr. Sawhill?
No disclosures.
Ms. Morse?
None.
Ms. Sullivan?
Yes, I would just not vote to accept the 1% art since the LUSAC Library is my project.
Sorry, we're on disclosures still. Do you have any disclosures for the
Oh,
cases?
sorry. Well, but yeah, we'll get to accept or not the LUSAC Library 1% art.
Oh, your disclosure, sorry.
Yeah,
Your
so
disclosure
that's-
is for the one that's on the, right, roger that, okay.
Yep.
Can I get a motion to have Ms. Sullivan?
I don't think you need to get a motion. I just needed to notify, right? Because we're not voting, we're just accepting.
Well, the way that the disclosures happen is when you have a conflict of interest, we need to actually, when you identify that conflict of interest, which you just did, correct? And you have a financial matter in the case that the 1% for art is, I believe you do, right? Do you gain financially from the project being a project manager? Thank you, Mr. Sawhill. And a second from Ms. Morse. Mr. Sawhill, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I move to direct Ms. Sullivan to participate in the 1% art for the LUSAC Library.
Thank you.
And I do not intend to support the motion. I think she has a conflict of interest and should not participate.
Thank you. Ms. Morse, would you like to speak to your second?
I support her not participating in her conflict of interest.
Great, thanks. Can we vote?
Is it no?
So we're voting to have her not participate. A no vote means that she will not participate. A yes vote means that she will participate. Thank you. So you are directed not to participate. Thank you for that disclosure. Mr. Miller, do you have any disclosures?
I think I do. In the case of 2015-0114, I was absent. That was for the major site plan review for the Alaska Village Senior Housing. I was absent.
Correct. So you will abstain from that since you have not heard any of the case.
You going to call my name? I don't have any disclosures.
Winking works.
Ms. Ream.
No disclosures.
Thank you. And I have a disclosure for 20150114. I have a conflict on that, and I will, as before, I will excuse myself from that. And that is all the disclosures. Whew. Thank you. Okay, next is the Urban Design Commission approval for 1% for art for the ZJ LUSAC Library. It's not a public hearing, and I believe Ms. Enzina Mariari, if I said that correctly. Marari, thank you, is here for a presentation. So if you could state your name and spell it for the record, that would be great.
My name is Enzina Marari, and that's E-N-Z-I-N-A, and my last name is M-A-R-R-A-R-I. So I'm here to present the proposals that were selected and awarded by the art selection jury for the interior 1% for art, call for art for Lusac Library. So there were two proposals. The first that I'll reference is Owen Tucker, and this should be in your proposal packet. Owen has proposed doing an intervention on the Kids Zone entry, and that intervention will primarily be on the wall and connected children's door, and then he'll also incorporate the glass windows that connect to the main door. And so I have some samples of his proposal to show you, and these are two renderings of the main image that he will have on the wall and children's door. And these are a view from the entrance of the library and then a view from the kids zone. So on the exterior, so approaching the kids zone, you'll be faced with a realistically rendered owl, and this is all done in acrylic paint with a graffiti-resistant and UV-resistant coating to reduce any maintenance fees over time, and also to allow for some protection of the acrylic for durability over time. So there's a little need for any maintenance requests. The background of the painting will reference childhood games and basic primary colors. One of the architectural features is a porthole glass window in the children's door, and that's right about in this area. And you can see that a little bit more clearly in some of the handouts that you have. And one of the eyes of the owl is that porthole. So it really connects back to the architectural concepts of the design as the library as a conduit and as a library as a portal of information. From the kids zone, you see a mechanically rendered owl with the same porthole in the eye. And the artist's concept around this was to show the owl in a realistic way and in a playful way, to call back to the owl as a mechanical marvel, but also to create an opportunity for children to be curious and imagine the possibilities of nature and technology. I've passed out some of his revised drawings that would be on the adjacent glass panels. Initially in his proposal, he suggested etching the panels in a very simple design, and the jury wanted him to revise that, to pull in a little bit more color, and to pull in a design that calls back to the painting. And so that was his initial redesign. It has not been approved by the jury, but I wanted to show that all to you and to reflect the direction he's going in. I also have a sample of his painting style, which is on this panel here. So it's very solid colors with some contour lines. I don't suspect any maintenance or durability concerns with this piece. The second piece that was selected is in your packet, and that is artist Richard Colley Studios. And this piece is called Portal of Perception. It is a suspended sculpture in the atrium of the library. And so you can view how it would hang in some of those handouts. And this is symbolically indicative of the eye as a symbol for the initial perception of imagery and objects, and has lots of different elements that call back to the synaptic processes of what we see and how that translates into knowledge and visual imagery. And so the artists have designed a suspended sculpture that's about 25 feet in length, about 14 feet wide at the top at its widest, and has elements suspending off of the sculpture similar to a chandelier. And the objects they've identified to be part of those kind of suspended tendrils are yet to be named. They want to work with the community, and they want to work with constituents of the library to come up with iconographic objects that relate back not only to Anchorage, but also relate back to the community and to the library itself. They are working with RIM Architects to revise their design and to come up with a hanging strategy that will be the most efficient and the easiest approach for them to use. The interior location budget is $29,000. And the suspended piece is $73,000. And we have communicated the need for seismic restraints due to an earthquake area with the artists, so they are aware of that. And we will likely pre-install hanging hardware and suspension that will handle the weight of the sculpture.
Great. Thank you for the presentation. Does anybody have any questions? Everyone shaking. Oh, Ms. Ream.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I just have one question. Will the suspension design be a stamped drawing? Because this is kind of I was kind of curious about the structural integrity. I mean, we're here to look at the safeties.
Right.
And so just making sure that it's a licensed, bonded structural engineer.
Oh, yes, it will be. They'll be working with either a Alaska licensed structural engineer or the structural engineer that's already working at the library.
Okay, I was just curious
Yeah.
about that because
Of
that's my
course.
concern.
Yeah.
Great, thanks. Ms. Morse.
Thank you, Chair. For the first proposal for Owen Tucker, I'm very curious to see how this renders on glazing, and I would encourage getting a sample of that glazing with paint on both sides before.
For the glass treatment. Yes, that's a great suggestion.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Seeing nothing, nobody's hands up. Can I get a motion to accept the 1% for art for the ZJ Lusac Library renovations? Thank you, Ms. Morse. Can I get a second? Thank you, Ms. Ream. Ms. Morse, would you like to speak to your motion?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think you picked great professional artists. I am a little bit concerned about the glazing and how it renders, but I think the team has done a great job on picking fun art for the library.
Thank you.
Ms. Ream, would you like to speak to your second? Nope. Thank you. I would just like to add that the packet was very well presented, and I appreciate the thorough detail that you want to submit that. It makes it a lot easier to review. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And no other questions from anybody else? We will start voting. Thank you. It looks like that passes. So we'll go on to C3, which is information item land use plan map from Mr. Davis from MOA Long Range Planning. Looks like. Oh yeah. Oh, we got to get. Sharon, can you ask Ms. Sullivan to come back into the room, please? Thanks. Still can, yeah.
And Zena, I really wanted to, this is Commissioner Ream, I just wanted to say thank you for coming. A lot of times
Yeah.
we have questions and they don't get answered, and these were the hanging structure was particularly,
For sure.
so I appreciate you coming, and I
Yeah.
hope to see you again.
Yeah, thank you so much. I plan on coming to present
Excellent.
the selections from here on out.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. Davis, did you have a presentation, or did you just want us to ask questions?
Yes, I appreciate that I am on the agenda and I'm here to answer questions and seek any comments and feedback about this initial draft, and looking forward to a future step in which we have the UDC look at the next draft plan and develop formal comments to the Planning and Zoning Commission. And lastly, if you all have any thoughts or advice on, once we do publish a public hearing draft, how we how it'd be most helpful for you and others in the design community to learn about this plan and provide feedback on it when it comes out. Thank you.
Okay, great. Does anybody have any, because the whole, bring back from last month, there were some people that were here. Mr. Miller?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I have, several comments on the land use plan map, and I think I'll submit those written just for clarification or to make it clear what I'm trying to get at. I did have some suggestions that wanted to share with you. The land use map that we have, as I'm sure you're well aware, is quite complicated, and you're trying to show several different themes on one layer. And really, as I was going through this, really it's not a land use plan map, it's a land use plan atlas. And I think you should accept that and present it as an atlas. So on some of your questions that we received in your email about the neighborhoods and the city centers and the individual pieces, specifically with Section 2, on your land use designations, I think it would be a lot more clear if you would to present, so for example for neighborhoods, if you were to present a map of just the neighborhoods, and then another map of just the city centers, and a map of the industrial areas, and you have your template right here for an atlas. It's just a matter of breaking it up a little bit more exclusively for clarity. As I was reviewing it and kind of trying to dig through it, I got lost in the pastel colors, and I, as a former GIS analyst and amateur cartographer, realized that you can't display that much information on one layer. And I think that's what you could do, and you've probably already discussed this, is present it as a series of layers, a series of maps. So that's one aspect of it. The other thing I got to thinking about, especially in the neighborhoods, is if you, and it might be in here somewhere, but affordable housing, and not just with multi-family housing, but affordable housing in the broader context. And I didn't see as much discussion on that as I think it deserves. And then lastly, and like I said, I'll give you some more detailed comments later on. But lastly, wondering about coordination with other agencies, specifically DOT. A lot of the roads that we have in the city are DOT maintained, and DOT is mainly concerned about traffic movement, which doesn't necessarily coincide with livability or neighborhoods. And when I'm driving down the street and I see a 45-mile-an-hour speed zone through what is a commercial district, it seems like a disparity there. So those are kind of the broad comments that I have. Again, this is it could take a long time to really go through this the land use plan map in detail to provide you comments, but I'll get to those soon enough. But just wanted to again kind of give you those broader themes.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Mr. Davis, did you want to respond to any of those, or just take? I saw you taking notes, so that's fine if you just take notes, and we'll go on to the next one.
Either way is fine. We've met with DOT 3 times, and we plan to continue to meet with them because I feel like you've hit on an important conundrum for us and DOT, and we are talking about those areas and how to reconcile the two functions of the street and to coordinate with DOT and a lot of other agencies, but DOT in particular. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Ms. Sullivan?
I have a few comments. I was reading the section about applying tax abatements, and I thought that it would be nice if we could integrate a little of residential and mixed use and focus a little in that two type of projects, since there's a need, and it's really hard to pencil down the residential projects. So that's one of my comments. Another of the comments is the bulk requirements. The bulk requirements are very specifically more like for office buildings, and I tried so many times to do it like a residential building downtown, and it's just very hard because residential tends to be linear, and it's not working very well with the bulk requirements. So perhaps we could create more bonuses to get more bonuses or have a break or something, so to facilitate, we need the bulk requirements to let the light go through, but, it's not quite working for residential. And then another of my notes is the downtown design standards plan. It's not approved yet by the assembly, but this should include in-depth evaluation of residential and high-rise density, so we have a little more guidelines. And that's all my comments.
Great, thank you. Mr. Davis, did you want to speak to any of those, or just nod like I say you're taking notes, so...
Yes, thank you, and I may check back with you just to make sure I understand the items properly. But thank you.
Great, thanks. And then, so I have a question on this, on process. So there's a lot of data in here, and I have some pretty superficial ones right now, but at the end of our agenda, there's reports, and there's committees. It seems like it would be appropriate to have one or two people from here attend. I'm sure there's some regular meetings going on right now that are at the Muni that are processing all this info, and perhaps somebody, if willing, could go and listen and then report back as things progress, so that when it comes in the fall or early spring, it's not an onerous task to catch up with what's going on. Is that something that's happened in the past? I guess that's to Ms. Ferguson or Mr. Schoenthal or Mr. Davis, whoever. We could talk about it at the end of the meeting too, if you'd prefer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Urban Design Commission can form committees. The Planning and Zoning Commissions form several of them, and around special master plans and projects. I guess I was surprised to hear that that Mr. Davis was going to, that the Planning Department was going to be bringing this plan before the UDC for a recommendation. Plans usually just go to the Planning and Zoning Commission. I think the stage that long-range planning is at with this plan is to gather information, and they'll present a public hearing draft at some point in the future, and that will go through the approval process. But the hundreds of presentations that Mr. Davis is making, I think that they're nearing the deadline for comments on this community discussion draft in order to package it and start working on a public hearing draft. But this is his project.
Yeah, I was thinking that after this draft was completed, which is in the next month or two, right, then a new process is starting, and perhaps at that time people could start participating. Of course, everybody else can chime in too, and why don't we talk about this at the end of the meeting? Are you going to stick around, Mr. Davis? Probably not. Okay, so we'll talk about it at the end, and then I'll shoot you an email. How about that? Sound good?
Thank you so much for your time, and if there are members of it that are interested, we'd appreciate them following it. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks for coming in the presentation. Okay, next agenda item is the consent agenda. And we have one, Okay, so we just have one resolutions of approval, which is 2016-005, major site plan review for Alaska Village Senior Housing, which I have the conflict of, and I will abstain. So if I could get a motion to approve the consent agenda. Thank you, Mr. Salo, and second by Mr. Winchester. Any discussion? Nope. Seeing none, everybody can vote. Thank you. 1, 2, 5. So that passes. Thank you. The next is unfinished business. There's none. Regular agenda. Case number 2016-038, State of Alaska Context-Sensitive Solutions Transportation Project Site Plan Review. Case number 2016-0038. This is not a public hearing. Ms. Ferguson?
Yes, this is a plans and hands review for Abbott Road Rehabilitation Phase 2 from Elmore Road to Birch Road. DOT is requesting approval of the plans and hand review for the Abbott Road rehab. The purpose of the project is to extend the service life of the facility and enhance safety and capacity. The project is identified in the 2035 Metropolitan Transportation Plan as a short-term priority, meaning that it is intended to get funded and built between 2011 and 2023. The proposed project will provide 6-foot shoulders, which will function as a shared use thoroughfare for bicyclists and pedestrians. The safety improvement is also considered a paved shoulder bikeway as identified in the Anchorage Bicycle Plan. The proposed improvements are bulleted on page 2 of the packet. Under effects of the proposal on the area surrounding the site, the lack of a continuous pedestrian pathway on the north side of the road negatively affects nearby residents. Students and parents are not able to access the high school or the sledding hill via a paved pathway. With the rehab of the road and the realignment and repaving of the existing pathway, the opportunity exists to provide a continuous pathway to Birch Road. The opportunity to provide the extended pathway will not occur again for many years. In the department recommendations are on page 6 and 7 of the packet. There are 4 of them. That's all I have.
Okay, thanks. So we have some information laid on the table here. It looks like part of the presentation. And we have DOT, a representative for DOT here. Oh, do we have any questions for Ms. Ferguson before we go there? Ms. Ream?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, so I'm confused because is this Planning and Zoning Commission meeting May 2nd, 2016, page 2 of 4 of the minutes?
Yes.
Okay, so these weren't in our packet, right?
No.
Okay.
I was looking through it, reading through it today, and realized I forgot to include it, so you have them there.
Okay. And so in reading this, they're really minimal. You know, there's no staff presentation. Carla Smith was Alaska Department of Transportation, blah, blah, blah. The commission discussed the public process, extending the service life of the facility, safety, and traffic flow. They also discussed paving the multi-use path and service high school's traffic pattern. What was the discussion about the path? That's one question. And then we have Commissioner Spring on page 3 intends to support the motion, and then in the second line he says it meets the project objectives to reduce crashes, improve mobility, and takes into account the needs of multimodal pedestrians and bicyclists as well as transit. And this was Francis?
No, that was Sean Odell reviewed that one.
Okay.
The SMO, is that what you're asking? The initials next to it?
Yeah, sorry. I thought I saw Francis's name on here. Sorry, Francis. So I don't think they do at all. So I want to, and the reason why I'm confused is because the same planning department, they didn't make a condition for approval, or maybe they did, but I don't have the original, to pave the pathway or provide a sidewalk from the end of the sidewalk to Birch. I didn't see that as a condition of approval, but I do see that here, and I do agree with it.
Right.
I don't know what the conditions are as to why it isn't in there, so I'm not sure if I'll continue to agree with it. But I'm just confused as to the lack of consistency.
Through the chair, Ms. Ream, what goes to the Planning and Zoning Commission is the DSR, which really looks at, this is the project, this is the reason why we need the project, these are the alternatives that we considered, and this is our preferred alternative. And that's what they're limited to. And so when it comes to the Urban Design Commission, the Urban Design Commission is looking at it in much greater detail than what the Planning and Zoning Commission reviews.
Okay, that makes more sense then. I think that's the only question I had for staff.
Thank you, Mr. Sawhill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In DOT's application, it starts out with, they don't normally bring 3R projects to P&Z and UDC for approval. And so why are we seeing this one? What's special about this one that it needs to come to us?
Through the chair, Mr. Sawhill, the reason why is, you're right, they don't usually bring 3Rs, but when we saw the project, it looked like it was beyond what the R stands for, rehabilitation, resurfacing, something else, and it seemed to be beyond that because they were adding and extending a lane, putting in a two-way turn, left turn lane, et cetera, and it was more than what we typically would see for a simple 3R project. And so, but it didn't rise to the occasion of a 4R project, so it was in this area between a little bit more maybe than a 3R, but not a 4R. So in a discussion that I think Erica and Jerry had with DOT, they all agreed that they would bring that project forward for the, DSR and plans in hand review.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I will add one other comment. We have 4 case packets, 4 things on this project. One of them was emailed to us, one of them came in our case pack, 2 of them came in our case packet, and we have 1 tonight. It'd be great if all of that was consolidated into one. Not sure how we can accomplish that in the future, but if we could try to do that, that would be fabulous.
Okay.
Thanks. All right, now we have somebody from the States here. Hello.
Hi.
Could you... Do I need to bring this down? Yeah, so we're having a little bit of technical difficulties, as you can
That's
see.
fine.
So I
We
apologize.
did bring slides that were just handed out that you
Okay.
guys can reference to as I go through the presentation if you would like, because it was a little glitchy, and it was a little glitchy last time we were here as well. So,
Great. Thank you. So if you could state your name for the record and spell it, and then you
Sure.
can start. Thanks.
my name is Kristen Kiefer, Kristen, then Kiefer, Keif as in Frank, ER, and I'm a project engineer with the Department of Transportation.
Great. Thank you.
All right, I'll go ahead and kind of run through our presentation. It sounds like there's a couple questions already that might be on the table from the discussion. Here to introduce the Abbott Road Rehabilitation Project. The project was originally scoped as one project, and it was funded through the STIP. The proposed project was funded and proposed through AMATS. The project has now been broken into 2 phases. Phase 1, Lake Otis to Jupiter Drive. The design is complete and it's currently under construction. We anticipate the majority of construction to be complete by the end of the year, or the end of the summer, with final completion in the middle of next summer. Phase 2 goes from Elmore to Birch. We are currently in final design, acquiring right-of-way, and coordinating with utility companies. We anticipate advertisement late in 2007, with construction beginning in 2018. The phase delivery was to provide safety improvements in a timely manner. The purpose of this project. As stated before, this was a 3R project, a resurfacing, restoration, and rehabilitation project. The purpose of a 3R project is to extend the service life, enhance safety, and improve traffic flow. The existing conditions along Abbott Road experiences long queues and delays during commutes. It has one of the highest crash rates on the hillside. It's a 2-lane arterial. It's in the 75th percentile for moose collisions. There are narrow shoulders, and the multi-use pathway on the north side of the road is in poor condition and does not meet current standards with crossings for side streets. These numbers show involvement of crashes along the roadway. There were 233 total crashes in the study period, 157 which were property damage, and 76 that involved injury, including 103 minor injuries, 5 major injuries, and 1 fatality. 27 of these collisions involved moose. In 2012, the preliminary engineering report and environmental document were signed. They looked at different alternatives, and 5 alternatives were evaluated. The first alternative, the no-build alternative. The second was to upgrade the roadway without adding additional lanes or altering the lanes. The third alternative was to widen to a 5-lane section between Lake Otis and Elmore and widen to 3 lanes between Elmore and Birch. The fourth alternative was to widen to 3 lanes with no intersection improvements, and the selected or preferred alternative was to widen to 3 lanes with that center 2-way left turn lane and improvements to the intersections. The center 2-way left turn lane with improvements to the intersections. It shifts the alignment to the south for the majority of the project to minimize right-of-way impacts. It improves the level of service at intersections and reduces congestion along the corridor. The center 2-way left turn lane removes turning traffic from the through lanes, can reduce delay, reduces those rear end and side swipe collisions, and separates opposing traffic. It addresses safety concerns, it improves intersection movements, and cost-effectively satisfies the purpose and need of the project. Many of the crashes on this corridor are rear ends and collision and angle crashes. Here's a depiction of the proposed changes to Abbott Road. As you can see in the figure, there it goes. There's a 14-foot center 2-way left turn lane to remove that turning traffic from the through lanes. There's a through lane in each direction, as well as 6-foot shoulders, which will serve also as a bikeway. The multi-use pathway will be repaved, as well as swept in at side streets to meet current safety standards. There will be clearing for moose and to reduce those collisions, and the relocation of utilities. A little bit on phase 1 of the design. The design is complete and construction began in May. There'll be a center 2-way left turn lane, an eastbound through lane beginning at Lake Otis, so that right turn at Lake Otis when you're heading east will be converted to a through lane and continue and merge about halfway to Elmore. The culvert at Little Campbell Creek will be upgraded to meet fish passage standards. The intersection will be improved at Elmore. The pathway, there will be pathway improvements, repaving in the sweeps. Curb ramps will be brought up to current ADA standards, and transit stops will be added or will be improved and added at Lake Otis, near Littlebrook, and at Elmore. We're also looking at adding a test slab. So it's a steel fiber reinforced rubberized concrete test slab. We're working with FHWA and UAA. This is an experimental feature that will be monitored. And the goal of this feature is to look at rutting and what we can do to improve our roads. This is our kind of real-world test. So phase 2 of the project. This is from Elmore Road to Birch Road. We're looking at kind of the same roadway layout as phase 1, that center 2-lane left turn lane with a lane in each direction. We'll be improving the sight distance along the roadway by lowering those hills so that drivers can see further. We'll be clearing vegetation for visibility. The pathway will be rehabilitated, as well as curb ramps brought up to current ADA standards. We'll be adding transit facilities. In Phase 2, we'll be adding one stop at Elmore and then stops at Sahali. We are looking at lighting. Currently, the warrants for lighting are not met. We looked at a school zone. It's not planned at this time. This decision was made in conjunction with the municipality, the Anchorage School District, and the Department of Transportation. But this project does not preclude a school zone or a crossing in the future, should the boundaries change or conditions change. Utilities will be undergrounded, most notably the overhead electric on the south side of the road between Elmore and Birch. And at the Birch Road intersection, we'll be adding a right turn pocket if you're turning south onto Birch. A little summary of some of the recent public involvement events that we've done and attended and are planning on attending. We've had a very extensive public involvement process through this project. Had a website. We've attended over 20 community council and community meetings. We've held 4 open houses for the projects now and attended other ones like O'Malley. We've attended the Anchorage Transportation Fair for the last two years and have responded to comments that were generated through our website. Some of the costs of the project. The Phase 1 design and acquisition were done together under one group when the project was originally scoped. There's a breakout of the 2 costs for construction and utility relocation for the 2 different phases of the project. Again, Phase 1 was from Lake Otis Parkway to Jupiter Drive, and Phase 2 is from Elmore Road to Birch Road. Here's a schedule kind of based off of starting with last year, looking at the 2 different phases. Currently we're in construction for Phase 1, and we'll continue our public involvement and coordinating with our construction staff. Phase 2, we're anticipating construction in 2018. Until then, we need to complete our design, finish acquiring right-of-way, coordinate with utilities, and reevaluate our environmental document. I want to thank you all very much for the time and the opportunity to share this project with you, and I'm very excited to help bring this safety project to Anchorage. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Ms. Kiefer. Does anybody have any questions for Ms. Kiefer? Ms. Ream.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for that presentation, Ms. Kiefer. So, why wasn't the pathway extended from where it ends west of Service to Birch?
So if you look at the current pathway now, the pathway does go, it leaves the department's right-of-way, goes through AWWU property, and then extends and loops around the back of Service High, connecting with the pathway on Birch and the pedestrian overcrossing there. When the project was originally scoped, and we looked at the planning documents, the 2010, I believe it's the Anchorage Bicycle Plan, showed the section of Abbott Road from Birch, or Lake Otis to Birch, as a shoulder and a shared pathway, a shared shoulder, so that shoulder will be a bikeway. So we widen the shoulders to the 6 feet, which meet the current national standards for a bikeable shoulder.
But you're aware of the PED Plan project number 53, which is to extend a missing sidewalk from Lake Otis to Hillside Drive?
Yes.
Because that's the one I'm concerned with, because it actually had a high rating. It was 7 out of 10 on the priority scale, 53 out of 390 projects or something. So it's not something that we should have scoffed at, I don't think. I understand, looking at the right-of-way limits, that there were significant, obviously, constraints, especially when I look at the amount you guys spent on acquisition.
Yes.
And I know that there's limitations with grade issues at the guardrail.
Yes.
And because of that awesome sledding hill.
Yeah.
But I find this to be, and we see it all the time, It's just a blatant disregard for the municipalities' comprehensive plans, adopted plans. I mean, and funding is always an issue, you know, and it could have been a paved sidewalk adjoining that 6-foot shoulder, because that 6-foot shoulder could have been reduced to, I think, 5.5 or 5, and a sidewalk attached, a 5-foot sidewalk attached, and we could have had an actual bike lane and a sidewalk. So I'm not happy with it. And I know this has been a bone of contention with, of course, our land use, or I'm sorry, our non-motorized transportation coordinator. And I don't know what to do about it, but it sounds like you guys are planning and zoning didn't know about it, it doesn't sound like, at the DSR level, and now we're faced with making the decision of whether or not to add that as a condition. And if we added that as a condition, what would be the response?
I'm not sure. At this point, I would have to discuss it with management as well as, planners. With it being a 3R, not all plans are considered. It's a very cost-effective, how are we spending taxpayer dollars appropriately? Where are we putting that fund, and are we being responsible with those? And it's a difficult decision to make. It has been something that's been brought up throughout the project life. There are significant delays with adding something like that. Once you cross that right-of-way line, especially when you're dealing with a school and the practice fields and a community thing, and getting into that resource, it triggers a lot of stuff. And those cause delays. And when you're looking at a safety project, I think it's a very difficult decision to make.
And as much as I respect that, I find that you're not looking, not you, the project is not looking wholly at the safety aspect, because actually Abbott had a couple crashes from pedestrian and vehicles in the past. So it actually is an issue. I know I've seen kids clinging to the guardrail as they're coming in from Birch, because there's no pathway in front. They'd have to go into the woods. And I don't know that I'd want my child walking alone in the woods to get to school. I'd rather have them in the view of the street, safely off the street, and not in a 6-foot shoulder.
Yeah.
I think it is added as a condition, so...
Okay.
Yeah, okay. I'll
Thank
stop
you, Ms. Green.
belaboring the
You're
issue.
good. I have a question. You have a couple of 3 or so here that are lined up. First question that I have is, can you explain the difference between the 3R and the 4R that Ms. Ferguson alluded to? Because I am not aware of that.
Yes. So a 4R project or reconstruction basically brings everything up to current standards. So if the current standard, if you have a road and it has a 2-foot shoulder, if the current standard is 8 feet, it becomes 8 feet. A lot of times they're also for capacity reasons, to improve the capacity of a roadway. A 3R, there's a study that goes on. We look at different improvements and what those costs are. It also looks at crash rates very heavily and what type of injuries or what type of crashes they are. So for a 3R in this case, one of the recommendations out of the 3R analysis was to widen the shoulders, especially between Birch and Elmore. The shoulders are very narrow. So when we look at that and analyze it, we look at the number of crashes, we look at what we anticipate the crashes to be if we widen the shoulders by 1 foot, if we widen the shoulders by 2 foot, if we widen the shoulders by 3 feet. And we analyze that and then look at the cost and find that balance point. So it's a way for transportation engineers to cost effectively build a road without bringing everything to current standards. Because bringing everything to current standards can be have quite a few impacts, including right-of-way, utilities, all those other things that start translating into very large dollar figures.
And that's the 4R or the 3R?
That's the 3R. The 4R, everything comes to current standards.
And what triggers the difference between a 4R and a 3R?
I'm not entirely sure. Generally, it's scoped with our planning, and it would be something that would be brought forth in the STIP, is how I've generally received projects that are either scoped as a 3R or scoped as a 4R. So for a project in Anchorage, it would go through AMATs, and it would be based on the purpose and need. I'm not sure how that gets determined through their process.
It's very interesting how DOT roads and Muni roads come before us and the different criteria that they're held to.
Yes.
I don't agree with it at all. I
That-
think DOT is held to a different standard and MOA is held to a higher standard. And we as this commission, I think, share a lot of that thought process and are really confused on why this is even before us. But it's before us, so we're going to hear it. And we have some more questions here. Mr. Miller.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of questions. Are you familiar with the conditions that staff has recommended on this project?
Yes, a little bit.
Okay. Do they mesh with what you're doing in Phase 1? So
I'm sorry.
let me clarify that. So we were driving through the area this past weekend and saw the construction, and then immediately thought about this project. And I'm not familiar with Phase 1.
Okay.
And I was just wondering how Phase 1 and Phase 2 kind of mesh up, especially when it comes to some of the conditions that are being recommended with the pedestrian access specifically.
I guess I could speak to Phase 1 and see if that answers your question. I have a little bit of confusion, but on Phase 1 of the project, so the multi-use pathway that's on the north side of the road goes from Lake Otis to Jupiter Drive, where the limits of Phase 1 end. That pathway will be repaved and rehabilitated and then realigned in certain areas to reduce either right-of-way impacts or for materials reason or utility conflicts, and then also be swept in at side streets, which is kind of the new gold standard for path crossings at side streets. And then curb ramps at Lake Otis and at Elmore will be brought up to current standards.
Okay, and then so with Phase 2, those weren't, there's no pedestrian pathway right now.
There, on Phase 2, it will continue to rehabilitate the pathway on the north side from Jupiter until when it leaves the right-of-way. It goes on to AWW property and snakes behind the school.
Okay. That clarifies things. Thanks. And then you had mentioned, we have rear-end crashes and angle crashes, and is that because there is no center turn lane, or has that been evaluated as to the cause of those crashes?
In looking at crash data, there's a little interpretation there. You're kind of guessing as to the situation and using a very educated guess to do that. Yes, we anticipate that the center two-way left turn will reduce those.
Okay, and have you considered reducing the speeds along Abbott Road to perhaps mitigate some of those crashes? Or is that an option? Which it might not be.
It's something that we could look at and evaluate with this project. I haven't done it specifically. Abbott Road is an arterial. Generally, those arterials are 45. Mm-hmm. We're making improvements to the roadway to meet standards at a 45-mile-per-hour road.
Okay, and then right in front of Service High, is that still 45?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Of course. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Mr. Sawhill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to follow up on one of Mr. Miller's statements, there's 4 conditions of approval, and you have no objections to those conditions of approval?
I'm not sure what the four conditions are.
You probably need to
Other
read
than-
them, because one of
Can I
them is
have a
to
copy?
build a trail.
Sorry, this is the first time I've seen them. Okay, so I guess to speak to Condition 2, extending the pedestrian multi-use pathway, I cannot answer that at this time. It has been discussed and analyzed, and delaying the project is a hard decision to make. Yeah.
Okay. Would you like us to postpone the project to allow you to develop a position on these conditions of approval and come back and argue your position? Because once we say this is the conditions, these are the conditions that the department will be expected to adhere to. So this is a big deal. You know, we're adding a pathway here. And same with the striping as a change in the striping to indicate a bike lane. I would really be interested to see what Scott Thomas has to say about that comment. I think it's a very important comment, and I'm not sure it's appropriate for us to add that. I'd like to have some response from the department on that.
Yes, we do look very carefully when we add those things. I know currently with the bikeway and no pathway being present on the south side, we're very hesitant to add those markings because it then prohibits pedestrians from using it, is my understanding. I would have to get Scott Thomas's input, who's the regional traffic engineer for the department, before making that decision. They've never been a part of the project until.
And then I guess my last comment is, you know, we're the Urban Design Commission. So we're the amenities guys. You know, we like amenities, and so we like to see projects come that have landscaping, that add to the urban fabric of our community. And DOT is just hit and miss on amenities on their projects. The Glen Highway interchange, beautiful project. You guys did an incredible job there. HSIP projects have zero amenities. They're not allowed to have.
Yes.
Normally, 3R projects have no amenities.
Yes.
And so, to tell you the truth, I'd just as soon not see 3R projects because they frustrate me. I'm looking at all this available right away, and I'm envisioning maple trees and other, you know, maybe some vertical elements with some color that I think you guys could do a great job doing, and you do nothing. And I get frustrated by that. So if you're going to bring projects to us, one of these days we're going to deny a project because it doesn't have any amenities and it doesn't meet the standards of our community. And I don't want to get there. And I would like to understand what the department's philosophy is and what their plan is and what their budget is to, you know, be good community members and provide good transportation system and an attractive transportation system. So that's more of my soapbox in a statement than a question. But I think you can relay that to Mr. Amundson, and I'm sure he'll have choice words for me. I'm a little reluctant to go forward with requirements that you really haven't seen yet and don't have a response to, and kind of leaning towards a postponement if you would like one.
So maybe we could talk a little bit about the process,
Sure.
just to kind of update you on how this kind of works. So you guys come before us, and we have really 3 venues that we could do. 1, approve it. 2, deny it, which means you have to start the entire thing over again. We really don't like to do that. And 3 is to postpone it, which means that we would take this case and we would say we postpone it indefinitely or until you tell us you can come back. Sometimes petitioners will sit down here and say, oh yeah, I'll be back at the next meeting or 2 meetings or of the such. And what happens there is you're allowed time to basically review with your coworkers and your bosses, basically, and the powers that be to make the decisions. If they're not here tonight, a lot of times they're here and they can just respond. But it allows you to not go down a path that you don't want to go down, and us down a path that we don't want to go down. I agree wholeheartely with Mr. Sahil that we want to work with you guys. We want to see some projects. We want to see the community better. We don't just want clear-cut road right-of-ways and pavement go in. So what Mr. Sahil asked was if you would prefer a postponement, and I don't think I heard any response, but we have 2 more people here to chime in, so maybe think at the end.
I think a postponement is appropriate at this point. I mean, I've just received these comments.
Next month's meeting, maybe?
Yeah, if I could get on the agenda, I think that's enough time for me to gather information on these and look at, what are some of the implications of incorporating some of these things. And I would like to get feedback from some of, like, Scott Thomas on the markings and signing.
Great. Okay, so
Thank you.
a couple of more questions
Yeah.
here for you. Mr. Winchester, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my questions were similar, but my comments are maybe a little bit different. This is actually where I was born and raised, so I know this area very, very well, as I know your dad does. And I find it very untenable that this piece of property owned by Anchorage Water and Wastewater Utility, that you basically did not get the expanded right-of-way. I mean, that's the municipality of Anchorage. They ought to be able to grant that right-of-way and expand that pathway. And what you really have here is this whole residential area and a path and a road into Trailside Elementary School, and you basically stopped any kids from walking up the road and going into that elementary school driveway. Now, there's probably other pathways, I understand, through the woods, but this is the main road. This is where the kids are going to feel safe. This is where it's lighted. And you've got another 2 blocks, maybe a block and a half, a path to build on a municipal right-of-way. I mean, you don't even have to buy it. I'm sure the muni just grants it to you. And you didn't do it. I don't think that's going to fly with this group. In fact, I know it's not. It's not going to fly with me. So I can be one of the ones right now to say it's deny or postpone, personally. And you have to meet these, and then I see that's exactly what Sharon asked for, was that pathway, and you're going to have to agree to it.
Okay.
Okay? That's my comment.
Okay.
And no further comment.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Winchester. Ms. Ream.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, so I can answer the question for the condition 3. So, and you can verify this with Mr. Thomas, but I've been working a lot with bike plan implementation, and so long as it's not a divided highway or a divided road, so that there's not a median that divides the road, I don't know if the center two-way left turn lane counts. I don't think it does. That if you have a pathway on one side, you can have bike lanes. And that being said, you can have bike lanes from Lake Otis at least to Service. And then you would just change it to a bike route. And condition 3, just to clarify, it's actually asking for bike route signs, not bike lane signs. So
I apologize.
So because they understand that the bike plan is actually calling for shoulders, they're not forcing the bike lane.
Yes.
But the bike lane is something that can be done, at least in the first phase up to Service. Further, I know that the condition states a multi-use pathway, but I think the current standard for a multi-use pathway is 10 feet. And 10 feet plus the 6-foot shoulder is 16 feet. But if you considered I had to correct myself, a bike lane can be a paved width of 4 feet with a curb and gutter of 2 feet and a 5-foot sidewalk. So you actually could get away with an 11-foot rather than the full 16, which saves you 5 feet of having, because I know that guardrail is going to pose an issue. But just keeping that into consideration, seeing if the sidewalk is something that we can put in lieu of a pathway in that section.
And I'll have to look at that and consider some of the drainage and what that's going to do for that roadway area, as well as lighting requirements. I believe at 45, if you have curb and gutter, continuous lighting is required. So that's going to be an additional space required for those. But I'll have to double check with that, and I'll confirm, because I'm not entirely sure off the top of my head exactly what that is.
And I am, so did you actually try, or did not you, DOT try to work with the school with gaining some right-of-way there?
I believe it was looked at early on. Touching and going across that line, my understanding, it triggers a 4F consultation.
Right.
Which, in the nature of a 3R where you're looking at cost-effective safety improvements, that's a very big bite.
Okay. Okay, well, and I only have one other question. And the report says, the staff report says that the DOT is putting in high-pressure sodium lights at intersections. Is that right?
I believe so, yes.
Why?
I think we're actually looking at doing LED, but it hasn't been decided yet for this
Okay.
project. Let's see, where is that supplemental?
It's my understanding the infrastructure itself is more expensive, but the overall maintenance costs tend to be a lot less expensive. So, just an idea.
Great.
I will look at it again and talk with our traffic folks, but currently the Department of Transportation is doing a lot of the high sodium, and we're looking at switching to some of the LED. I believe O'Malley, they're looking at installing the LED, and we'll see how that goes. There's also some maintenance concerns that the department has as well, but it's not precluded, I guess. We'll have to look at it more.
Okay, thanks.
Great. Thank you. Ms. Ferguson?
Yes, I just wanted to, since Commissioner Ream mentioned it, it's not only but the energy savings of LED over a high pressure sodium light is extreme. So that's another reason to put in LEDs. What I wanted to say is just to clarify that normally 3R projects don't come to either Planning and Zoning Commission or the UDC, but this one was an exception because it didn't quite fit within the 3R. And so, as I said, Erica McConnell and Jerry Weaver did sit down and meet with DOT, and the decision was to bring it forward.
Yeah, this is kind of a unique project, I'm sure, for you guys to see, with it being so far along in design as well.
Okay, thanks. I had three other things, actually, to kind of build on what Mr. Sahil said. I do support, even though it's a 3R, some sort of landscaping. I don't like to see the right-of-way cleared and then absolutely nothing put back in. I think that's very poor process on DOT's and design standard. Just so, and I'm not saying vegetate the whole right-of-way. There's a happy balance there, just do some. Lighting, I think, was noted that there's no lighting except for the intersections. We've had 2 or 3 presentations from the police department here that talked about lighting and visibility, and it makes a lot of sense to light the roadway and trails for safety reasons, maybe beyond the traffic, and then trails just continuing.
And we'll be keeping the lighting at the school.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. So that's all I have, and it doesn't look like anybody else wants to speak, so thank you, Ms. Kiefer, appreciate it. And I need to read this little blurb right here. Oh, I don't need to read this right now, so next is, we have a motion. Mr. Sahel has a motion, and a second by Mr. Winchester.
I have a quick question before I make my motion. What's the date of the meeting in I guess we have a meeting in July?
Lori, do you have that date?
July 13th. Yeah, it's July 13th.
July 13th? Okay. Mr. Chairman, I move to postpone case 2016-0038, Context-Sensitive Solutions Transportation Project Site Plan Review, plans in hand for Abbott Road, until the July 13th hearing.
Great, thank you, Mr. Sahel. Mr. Winchester? No, so I need to restate this. So we have a motion to postpone case 2016-0038, plans in hand review, Abbott Road, rehab, Phase 2, Elmore Road to Birch Road, and a second by Mr. Winchester. Mr. Sahel, would you like to speak to your motion?
Mr. Chairman, I think this says give the Department of Transportation time to review the conditions of approval and come back with us with a concurrence or a reason why we should change the conditions. And
Okay.
I'd like to have that chance so we can get a good project approval.
Okay, great, thank you. Mr. Winchester, would you like to speak to your second?
I intend to support the motion for the same reasons. I believe they need an opportunity to say yes or no to those conditions, and we'll vote accordingly.
Great discussion. Did anybody else have anything to add to that? Everyone's shaking their head no, so we will vote. Great, thank you. That case is postponed to the July meeting. Thank you, Ms. Kiefer. And everybody on the commission, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, let's get a little bit organized here. That goes there, so the next.
Hold on to it, please.
Okay. So now we have public hearings, and the first. So I'm going to read the process. The procedures by which the public may speak to the Urban Design Commission at its meetings is: 1, after the staff presentation is completed on public hearing items, the chair will ask for public testimony on the issues. Number 2, persons who wish to testify will follow the time limits established in the Urban Design Commission rules of procedures. 2A is petitioners, including all his or her representatives, is 10 minutes. Rebuttal by the petitioner may be allowed when time has been reserved. B, representatives of groups, community councils, PTAs, etc. is 5 minutes. And C, individuals is 3 minutes. Number 3, when your testimony is complete, you may be asked questions by the commission. You may only testify once on any issue unless questioned by the commission. And number 4, an individual may have appeal rights relating to any action the Urban Design Commission takes, except commission recommendations to the Assembly which are not appealable. Appeals must be filed with the clerk's office within 20 days after approval of the Urban Design Commission of the resolutions, which is the commission's final decision. A fee for the appeal is required at the time of filing. Okay, the case we have before us is case number 2016-0046. The variance from AMC 21.07.020B4 to allow a single-family dwelling to encroach into the stream setback. Do we have staff's presentation?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The house was partially constructed in 2004 with the intention of building an addition to complete the house in the future after electrical lines had been moved, some Chugach electric lines. The house received a final certificate of occupancy for construction in 2003. It was closed out. Now the owner is seeking to build that addition that was intended, but the stream setback requirement has since changed from 25 feet to 50 feet in the new code. One of the reviewing agencies objected to the granting of the variance. That was Watershed Management Services. They, are defending the stream setback requirement, globally. In your packet, there's one letter of support from a neighbor. Tonight, there was. What I'd like to do is to point out 2 of the laid on the table items that are before the commission. The first one is by the chair of the Rabbit Creek Community Council, Adam Lees, and he is essentially retracting the letter of opposition from the Rabbit Creek Community Council. He says in his email, which was laid on the table for you, generally the council does not agree with infringements into stream setbacks for the reasons we mentioned in our letter. And then he goes on to say, Mr. Paley's variance would affect a partially dry artificial tributary into a creek. It does not appear to require additional work, such as an increased erosion potential, such as to increase erosion potential, pollution, alterations to current drainage, or other pernicious effects to streams either during or after construction. Having had plans citing in the history with Chugach Electric more fully fleshed out than in the application, Mr. Paley's variance appears to meet standards 1 through 3 of the conditions of the variance approval. The extraordinary conditions being so much physical as legal between the plat, sewerage requirements, legal setbacks in place at the time of the construction, overhead lines, and requirements for a fire truck turnaround. The house had to be located in its current location, a point highly unclear to the board during our vote and recommendation for denial. Additionally, the time and the cost Mr. Paley has expended for about a decade demonstrates to me that this is not a haste, not a haste or pure profit-driven project, but one that tried to accommodate enjoyment of the property to the natural environment, which I find respectable and highly positive. So you had a community council letter that was, very opposed to granting the variance, and once new information was provided to the chair, he, although the community council hasn't met to make a formal decision, he writes this letter. There were, in your packet, there was one letter of support, as I mentioned. There was another letter of support that we just received a couple days ago. That was laid on the table, and this is from Shirley Ryan, the nearest to most affected neighbor. She says they have no objection to the proposed encroachment. Nothing about the building's original plans have changed. She goes on to say that, this will accommodate the stub out for a sewer that was planned. Her third point is that it won't encroach into the actual stream at all. And her last point is that it's a hardship because they won't have a downstairs bathroom unless they are able to build this addition. I just wanted to point out those laid on the table items. The department finds that standards 1, 2, and 3 are not met, but standards 4 through 8 are met. Therefore, the department must recommend denial of the variance. However, if after a public hearing the commission makes findings that standards 1, 2, and 3 are met, then we recommend the approval be subject to conditions 1 and 2 on pages 4 and 5 of your packet. I'd be happy to answer questions. Also, the property owner and applicant, Mr. Kim Paisley, is here today. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. We have Ms. Morse. Questions?
Thank you, Chair. Can you confirm with me that the petitioner has seen the two recommendations if we do vote on approval? Thank you.
Yes, through the chair, Ms. Morris, as soon as the report was signed, it was emailed to the applicant, and we've discussed the conditions of approval.
Thank you. Mr. Miller.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I had comments regarding the conditions or suggesting conditions from Steve Ellis from Watershed Management Services. It's on page 29 of our packet. The first one is provide an accurate plot map showing the proposed addition with any additional ground disturbing activities. That's not the one I'm wondering about. The other one I was wondering about was the illegal encroachments, and I went through Title 21, and Steve didn't really get into the specific section of Title 21 which discussed the illegal encroachments, and I was just wondering if you had dug into that, if you could speak to that at all.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Steve Ellis wrote these comments very early before we had a revised as-built site plan, and it was because he's a Air Force reservist, or he did some military service while he was away, and so I think these comments were in advance of some revisions to the plot plan. The illegal encroachments bit, you're not allowed to clear property within the stream setback, and I think he's referring, if you look at an aerial photo, it appears that more than just the house now is within the 50-foot setback. There's also sort of some grass or lawn, a few feet off of the home. And I think that Watershed Management Services views that. I think that that's what he's referring to as being the illegal encroachment. Potentially also the location of the driveway is gone a little bit further than the house. I think that that's what his reference is.
And was old Title 21, the setback was 25 feet. Is that area of clearing outside of that 25-foot buffer?
Yes.
Okay, so this would be, not necessarily grandfathered in, but under old Title 21 it'd be okay, and under new Title 20 would not be okay.
That's how I view it, yeah.
Okay.
Great, thank you. Anybody else? I have one. and that is the plot plan shows a distance of 42.5 feet, and usually when somebody is getting a variance, they're projecting the future construction, and the plot plan indicates something that's already built. So I'm confused as to what is the new that's being built.
Sure. Mr. Chair, please see page 16 to see the area of new construction. On page 16 of your packet, it's a close-up of that corner of the house, and you can see the penciled-in area of new construction. There's an arrow to it, and it's labeled. That's where the building or home bump out would be. That would be the footprint of the building. It would be 2 or 3 story. I can't recall, but
Okay, great, thank you. Yep. All right, no other questions? I'll open Mr. Winchester.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one quick clarification here. If I'm looking at that area of new construction correctly, and I just want to clarify that, the actual construction is away from the creek. So the existing corner of the building is at 42.5 feet, already built, can't change that. And where he's building is actually something between 42 and 50 feet. It's some, I don't know what that angle is, but it's some distance further away. Is that correct?
that's exactly right. It appears that the corner of the building is the furthest point of encroachment. He would be coming off of that, but going back away from the
Right, going back away from the creek. So essentially, we already have the worst-case scenario. It's existing there right now, and we're merely going to put a small addition that's away from the creek. Okay,
Yes.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. So now we'll open the public hearing, and if I could get the petitioner's presentation, please. If you could state your name for the record and spell it,
My name is Kim Paisley, P-A-I-S-L-E-Y. I'm the owner of the property. But I built a home, and in context eventually moving the Chugach power line. The easements that I ended up building on had the setbacks, I had the stream, the main Survival Creek stream, Chugach easements, and then the wet area in the back. The only reason I built on the property was because I was able to build without a septic system. I have public utility. So without public sewer, I could not have built on the property. Once the school was put up there, I was able to go ahead and hook up to the city sewer. But that was the only spot on the property that allowed me to do that. So I built when I could. I built the front end of the property of the house at an angle, and if you can see by the paperwork, I stubbed out the sewer, stubbed out the electric. For the only way I could ever do any expansion would be to move the line. And I knew if I had enough communication with Chugach over a period of time, I could probably do that, which I have now at this point, gotten to that point. When I went to go to do that, I found now that the setback went from 25 feet to 50 feet. The corner area, the southeast corner of my home, is the area I was going to come off to with a straight angle and come over. If you go towards the home, or towards the west, towards Virgo Avenue, I'm not in the setback. I'm only requesting 4.7 feet of that area is within that setback. When I built the home, I was well over 25 feet at that time was a setback. And now, waiting for Chugach, the code has changed, and now I've got 25 feet, went to 50 feet. So I'm requesting a 4.7 foot from the Threada Creek or a 7.5 feet from the nearest edge of the bank. That is a tributary, that ditch, which is now open water, sometimes of the year, was dug years and years ago by Anchorage Natural Gas, because in the next property over is their main line that comes from Kenai across and comes up. They went in there and did that before the subdivision was built, and they built, if you go up there, there's tracks, there's big ditches dug. That was all natural area at the time where just natural water came down and went into Survival Creek, the main front creek, which is in the west of my house, which I'm well away from. That was the main point of contention, was with the creek. the main survival creek. Now, the back area is a wetter area at certain times of the year, but it comes down and it collects into that area, which then becomes open water. I had Mr. Cunningham come up there 2 years ago and do a delineation of the area. At that time, there was water in it, and he says any open body of water is considered a creek. I don't even know the name of it. The neighbors don't know the name of it. It's an open, wet area, and sometimes the year it gets water in it. And they funneled it down into Survival Creek. That's Anchorage Natural Gas did that years ago. So what we're talking about is not the main Survival Creek. That's way up to the west, and I'm well away from that even with the 50-foot requirements now. What I'm talking about is the 25 feet going to 50 feet on the back southeast corner. And I'm only asking for, looking at between 4.7 feet and the 7, that's from the Threaded Creek, and that's the way I measured from Survival Creek originally. If you go from the closest bank, it'd be 7.5 feet. And that's where I'm at. I basically was going to finish up after I got all the communication done with Chugach. Chugach did a blanket easement. They're not on their 10-foot utility easement as the plat. They're cutting my property almost in half. So when I built there, I knew at the point I asked, had a letter from an attorney. I went through Con Bundy at the time, was a senator, and the whole point was just continue on, and keep communicating with them. I finally got Chugach to come up and go, okay, we can reroute it here, but it's going to cost you. Last year it was $30,500 and some odd dollars. This year it's $30,800 and some odd dollars. And if I don't do it this year, next year it'll be probably, $31,000 and something. Each year it goes up. So this is not something of a whim. It's very expensive to do all this, and I finally got the only way I can go, and that's towards the south area, which is the direction of the sun and the water. So if anybody lives on the lower hillside, that's the way you point your house. And that was the only way I could build at the time when I got in there. And without the city sewer, I couldn't have built anything. So if that's, I don't want any clarifications or anything I can I can add to, I'd be glad to it.
Great, thank you. You have 5 minutes and 8 seconds for rebuttal. Ms. Sullivan.
I have a question for you.
You can stay up here, sure, thanks.
It makes sense on what you're saying and really painful. I really understand what you're going through. I just have a very fast question and simple. What does this angle, corner, or spaces doing to the interior of your house? I mean, because you have more room around to grow, right? I just want to understand why it's so important to get that.
Well, I built the house at the time, an angle. If you can kind of, it goes at the angle of the Chugach electric line, because that'd be so many feet off them to get their approval to build. That area goes, the one corner of my house, it's 27 feet, but it's at an angle. It's like one side shorter. Where I was going to build on would have a 2-story area. It'd be a bedroom down below, and right above it would be a half bath and then a living area. Where my living area now is where my dining area should be. I have had to put a temporary wall in my garage. That steps down, which should have been an area of the garage, is now my dining area. So when I was going to put the half bath in, upstairs with my living area, I could move my dining area back to where it should be, have a living area, not a large area, and then downstairs I'd have a bedroom. So we're not talking about a lot of square footage. I mean, the area that was added in as a square footage area would be like 128 square feet. That's 7.5 feet. That's the largest area going into the setback to get to the 50 feet, and out 25 feet. I'm not going to go out 25 feet. I'm probably going to go out about maybe 15 or so, and I'm going to do it at an angle. I was at a square rectangle because I had to come up with a number of square footages. So it's 128 feet at the maximum, and that's going out 25 feet, and I'm not going to do that. If I was, I'd even be past, I wouldn't be in the setback. I'd be away from the setback. So if I decided to go out that far, I wouldn't be in any encroachment area at all. Because if you look at the way the stream goes, and I had the survey just done several weeks ago on the as-built, the further the stream goes, the further away the house is. So my area of contention is right there at the corner because I wanted to start out from that corner with the future expansion. I stubbed the sewer, the gas, everything is there. The pictures can show that. So if I don't get the extension, I don't know how I can put the half bath in. I'm in District 25, Area 25 of the Hillside. I don't know if I'm kind of keeping track of the sales in the area. I don't know of a house in that area that does not have a half bath on the main area. I don't. Any guests come in, they either have to go downstairs to a bedroom bath, which I have one bedroom down, or upstairs to my private. That's the only bathroom I have because cannot finish the one I intended to. That's what I'm trying to do now. So if I don't have access to a restroom, a toilet area, my value of the home is probably going to go way down. I don't know what it is, but just being able to sell a home in that area without a half bath off of the main area, the kitchen, dining, I just don't know of one. So, okay.
Thank you for answering. I think that helps a lot. I mean, it's
Great, thank
impacting your everyday functions.
Mr. Paisley, we have a couple more questions here for you, if you could stay
Okay.
up there. Thanks. Mr. Winchester.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One question I had, and I know the whole issue of water courses and waterways, and it's something that affects the whole country at this point. Have you, as far as I understand, and by the way, I built a home just 2 lots over from where you are, right on that creek, so I'm very familiar with the creek, its annual situation, et cetera. And you're exactly correct. I mean, that gas line ditch was dug there just so that they could move drainage away from the gas line. So that ditch is not full of water year-round, is that correct?
It fluctuates. Right now, it is. It's got water in it.
A lot of rain, but I mean...
Yeah, I think it collects from the 2 or 3 or 4 lots above me and comes down now.
Yeah,
if you go behind my house or behind my drive area, you can hear it, but you can't see it.
Right. It's not like the creek, though. The creek is year-round water, and I know there's a
Survival
difference
Creek
because
is
it's
year-round,
actually
yeah.
spring-fed. So that particular ditch, that was dug there, as you explained. And then the question I guess I would have is related to, the whole purpose of water courses and 50-foot setbacks, et cetera, is obviously to protect our drainage and protect, other things from flowing in. It seems to me that you do have a minimum of 25 to 30 feet of vegetation in front of this ditch. Is that correct?
The house is built up on if you can look at the plat, is on
right.
I cut out some of the hill area to build there.
Right.
So the area, you come off of that area several feet and it drops down, and then it's all into natural area. So the area down by the creek or ditch, the area of contention, is all natural. I've never touched it.
Do you have about 25 feet of vegetation back from the creek, approximately?
Yeah, I do.
Or more? Yeah.
Because it doesn't even
Because the distance from 25 to 50 feet, quite frankly, is a very arbitrary number. I mean, that's just, somebody decided, let's make it 50 feet instead of 25 feet. Now, all of a sudden, we're all going to deal with this, and it involves actually confiscation of your rights that just sort of happened along the way here, so we'll talk about that another day. My point is, you have adequate methodology for any drainage from your driveway or your property going into this drainage ditch to biofiltrate through vegetation. Is that correct?
Correct. The area that we're talking about has nothing to do with
So
creek whatsoever. It won't
plenty
even
enough of biofiltration.
It would not even get close to the
Right. We're not talking about a main highway, roadway with oils and greases. We're talking about a single-family residence. Okay. So that's the 2 questions that I wanted, is that there's adequate biofiltration there, and that we have basically a man-made drainage ditch, effectively, that's been created as part of this process. And certainly, Chujiak Electric, that's a common thing. They just built wherever they wanted to, and whether it was in the easement or not. So you were the beneficiary of some of that. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Morse.
Thank you, Chair. This is, it's kind of a question. The structure is 7.5 feet into the easement that we're talking about, but what are we talking about for the clearing? I know there was an existing electrical line, and so that's been cleared, but are we doing any additional clearing that would be in the easement? Okay.
No additional moving of any type of...
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Now we will open the hearing to public testimony. Would anybody like to speak for the case? I see nobody coming forward. Okay, so nobody wants to speak. So, Mr. Paisley, you have 5 minutes for rebuttal, which basically means that if you want to add to anything that we've set up here, you can add to it for 5 minutes.
No, at this point, I think I'm pretty clear. I got caught in a situation to where I was going to continue, and this electric line was the one, and I got to that point now, and I just was going to do that, and now I found this is a scenario. So I think I've got everything that I understand. I mean, I'm trying to let everybody know this is not a whim. This is something I've been planning for numbers of years. If it doesn't happen, the main point about, I guess, if it doesn't happen, it'll make a strange... I'll have to move out of the area for the setback is and continue on without I don't know where I can change my sewer. The sewer is embedded in concrete. It's in-floor heat. I don't know how I could access the drain for the sewer without being in, I mean, I don't know where I could add a half bath. I just don't have any idea. So that's what I'm trying to do. So thank you.
Great.
Any questions or?
Looks like Mr. Sahil, do you have a question for Mr. Paisley?
Sure, I just had a couple of questions so I can understand the drainage way. Is there quite a bit of vertical separation or elevation between your house and the creek? From looking at the picture,
I
it
look
looks
like I'm probably the house is, I built either, that's where the septic would have went if I didn't have sewer, or the house. The house is probably, I don't know, probably a good 15 feet maybe above where any water is. It's on the whole area in there is rather steep. So the area where my house is built is on a pad area, and then I have several feet on each side of the house where the new area was going to go. There's no vegetation, nothing there. It was all continue to go. And then you go down quite a slope. So the area that is where the back creek is several feet, and I would say probably maybe 12 to 15 feet in that range.
Okay, great. That helps. There's no danger of flooding, so that was one of my concerns.
No.
So thank you very much.
Great, thank you, sir. Doesn't look like there's any other questions. So you've done the rebuttal. So now we're going to close the public hearing, and the case rests with the commission. And it looks like Mr. Sahil has a motion. Mr. Sahil.
Yep. I move for approval of a variance from AMC 2107-020B4AI to allow a building addition to encroach 7.5 feet into the 50-foot stream protection setback, subject to staff's conditions number 1 and 2.
Great, thank you, Mr. Sahil. So we have a motion for approval for variance from AMC 2107-020B4AI to allow a building addition to encroach 7.5 feet into the 50-foot stream bank setback. That motion was by Mr. Sahil and seconded by Mr. Morse. Mr. Sahil, would you like to speak to your motion?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What I want to do is go through the 5 standards one at a time. I guess 8 standards one at a time. So we can talk about each of those and enter findings on the record that they have been met or not.
So I have a question for process. Do we discuss each one of those as he goes through it, or do we do it all at the end?
So Mr. Sahil will go through all 7 standards and make his statement, or 8 standards and make his statement, and then any of the other commissioners, and it would be great if more commissioners chimed in agreement and add to each of those. It's kind of painstaking, but
Right, but the question is it after he says number 1, or at the end of all 8 of them?
End of all 8.
At the end of all 8?
Yeah.
Okay.
Whatever Jim said,
Great.
I didn't understand the
Go
question.
ahead.
Yeah,
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin.
Yeah, no problem. The first standard is the proposed alternative achieves the intent of the subject design standard to the same or greater degree than the subject standard. I would find that this standard has been met. And again, one of the things we look for in variance applications is that the standards or the situation needs to be a physical standard that's unique to the property to find that the standard has been met. And for this, I find the unique physical standards that exist is that we have what is essentially a man-made drainage way where the drainage was diverted many years ago with the construction of the natural gas line. I also find that there's a steep grade between the building and the creek, which contributes to there's a unique physical feature that I find. And I find that there's natural vegetation that exists adjoining the creek that will provide adequate protection to the same or better degree than the 50-foot standard. So I think the 7.5-foot standard, I find that standard has been met. The next standard is the proposed alternative achieves the goals and policies of the comprehensive plan to the same or better degree than the subject standard. And again, I find that the 43 feet of buffer that will exist between the house addition and the stream bank is adequate and meets the degree which is the goal or the policy of the standard to be 50 feet. This is an intermittent stream. It has a low flow. It has a slow flow. So I find that that standard has been met. The third standard is the proposed alternative results and benefits to the community that are equivalent or better than compliance with the subject standard. And again, I find this standard to be met. I think this is a minor encroachment, and I believe that the standards of the community will be upheld with the existing vegetation available. The next standard, the variance, if granted, would not adversely affect the use of the adjacent property or permitted code. I would agree with staff's analysis that the standard has been met. And standard number 5, the variance, if granted, does not change the character of the zoning district where the property is located, is in keeping with the intent of the code, and does not permit a use not otherwise permitted in the district in which the property lies. And again, I would concur with staff's analysis that this standard has been met. Standard number 6, persons with disabilities are provided with access as required by the Americans for Disabilities Act, ADA, and reasonable accommodations. I'm not sure this applies to a creek setback encroachment, but I would agree with staff that this standard has been met. Standard number 7, the variance, if granted, does not adversely affect the health, safety, and welfare of the people of the municipality. Again, I find that standard has been met. I think our water quality issues will be maintained through this property with this minor encroachment. And standard number 8, in evaluating the request for a variance from the maximum sign height. Well, this is interesting. I don't think this applies, but again, I'll concur with staff's analysis that this standard has been met, and it's really not applicable because it's not a sign, not related to signs. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I intend to support the motion. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Sahel. Ms. Morse, would you like to speak to the second?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Following these statements, 1 through 8, I will not reread the standards, if that's okay.
Sure.
For my findings, I'd like to note that the design is just a good intended design with bad timing, and I sympathize with you as the petitioner to come against one problem against another. It sounded like you had a good plan. I believe you're following the intent of the code in all senses. The 43-foot buffer seems to be more than sufficient, and it would have been 2 years ago. And I know that you've been dealing with other issues. The house is going to be completed on private development, which is just good for the neighborhood to not have unfinished projects lingering. The neighbor's statement speaks in complete support of you, your next-door neighbor. I would like to also include, although it doesn't seem applicable, that along with the 7.5-foot structure encroachment, that at least a 10-foot clearing around the house is allowed for wildfire safety.
Was that a additional condition of approval? No.
No.
Just a statement. Okay, great. Thank you. Is anybody else? Anybody else like to speak to some findings, or Mr. Miller?
I'll talk. Yeah, I intend to support the motion. I was kind of waffling on this because it's kind of irrelevant, but I appreciate that Mr. Paisley has gone through the motions and contacted the municipality about potential conflicts and has gone through the process to resolve those. And I agree that I think if he had been encroaching on Little Survival Creek, that would be a different story. But with this little drainage ditch, I don't see that there is an issue. So I intend to support the motion.
Great, thank you. Anybody else? Seeing none, I'd like to add one, and that is that there is positive support from the Rabbit Creek Community Council for the project. So if everybody could please vote, that would be great. Thank you, and that motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Paisley. Have a good evening. So next on the agenda, actually, while we're on this one case, in a minute, I'll talk to Mr. McLaughlin. Where's the agenda? Here it is. Yes, Mr. McLaughlin.
I missed the question, Mr. Leon.
I didn't ask one yet, but I will now.
Yeah.
Just like the other case before us tonight, we had another digital file come, an email, and we had some confusion. It confused me, so I basically pitched the one that came with us and printed the one in the email, and I found that there was stuff that I should have read in the first one that wasn't in the second one. So if we could somehow not do that in the future, that would be fabulous.
Let me understand, Mr. Chair, the confusion is that so late comments came in after the packet was complete, and our department, Corliss, emailed it to you guys, and then we laid it on the table, and it was difficult to know which was duplicative. Is that the concern?
No, the first question, the statement when Corliss emailed it to us, I took that as the current packet and basically didn't read the other one because said that this is the current packet. She basically said that. And there's only like 5 pages. And it turned out that there was more information, like what you answered my question, like where is this being encroached? What part of the new building is being encroached? Oh, that's on page 16. It's like, oh, that's part of the staff packet that one I pitched because I was told there's a new one. And so that would be good to eliminate.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We'll do that.
Great. Thanks. And then on to the Davis question. Do we want to, as a commission, do we want to form like a committee, or do we want to wait a couple of months for the land use plan map update? What are everybody's thoughts on that?
It's always best to be involved early. So I would encourage earlier than waiting around for the next version.
Okay.
Yeah, my intent was to go to talk to Tom and just kind of flip through the comments that I had, because being a planner, I'm kind of involved in this.
Yep.
So would be happy to share that load amongst other folks.
So, Mr. McLaughlin, you mentioned that there was some hesitation that, this is kind of P&Z's role and not our role. And so could you expand on that a little bit?
So it's very rarely invoked that Planning Department asks the Urban Design Commission to provide advice. I'm sorry, that the Urban Design Commission provides advice to the Planning and Zoning Commission. and I was confused about that. Mr. Davis pointed out that in code, one of the roles and responsibilities, other responsibilities, kind of like other duties as assigned, is that the Urban Design Commission, being the design board, should provide guidance to the Planning and Zoning Commission. And so Long Range Planning Department, when they bring forward this plan, is going to be asking the Urban Design Commission to provide a resolution of, support, or a resolution making recommendations about the plan to the Planning and Zoning Commission. So it would be very appropriate to form a committee of 1 or 2 members on the land use plan map project, and for those members to be able to sort of provide reports at the end of meetings like this about where the plan is going, so that the commission would be well positioned to informed and to act when called upon.
Okay. Great. Does anybody want to do we need to make a motion to form this thing, or we just have a... Terry, do you know much about that? If we need to actually have a formal motion, or if we just say, hey, why don't you just report back to us next month, and if there's nothing, then report back to us the next month. So thanks. So let's start informally, and then once it starts rolling after a month or 2, when people are interested and they say, yeah, I want to go do this, maybe there's 2 or 3, and we can figure out the process, or 1 or 2, however many people want to be involved. And then we'll bring it up at the next meeting, and if Mr. Miller could be in contact with Mr. Davis, and then I'll just ask you at the end of the meeting, so if we could add that as a committee. Let's just name it the long range. What's that map called? The land use
plan map
project. Yeah.
Yeah.
Atlas.
If I had my way.
Yeah.
I'll just talk to Tom sometime between now and then, and let you know how he wants.
Yeah. Your mic's off, so. Perfect.
I think whatever is most beneficial for him, for us to proceed.
I anticipate the next couple, 2 or 3 months is going to be kind of low key, and then once it starts ramping back up towards the fall, it's going to be more involved. So, cool, great.
Okay.
Thank you. There's nothing else on the...
Harry, can you wait 1 second?
Yeah, go ahead. Oh, Terry. Oh, can we get a motion to approve, or adjourn, please? Approve to adjourn. Mr. Miller and Ms. Sullivan, thank you. See everybody in July.